I never thought I would find myself in a situation where I'd be writing about my marriage imploding right before my eyes. My name is Mike, and I've been married to Jenna for 6 years. We were that couple, the ones who seemed perfect together. We met in college, dated through our early 20s, and finally settled into a cozy house in a suburb outside of Chicago. But beneath the surface, things had been changing, and in a way that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It started with little things. Jenna used to text me throughout the day, little love notes or updates about her work as a marketing executive. But slowly, those texts became less frequent. I brushed it off, thinking she was just busy. I mean, her job had been demanding lately, with the whole team scrambling for a big campaign launch. Still, something felt off. Our evenings together turned into her scrolling through her phone while I watched TV, our conversations dwindling down to the weather or what to have for dinner. And then there were the late nights. At first, it was just an occasional work dinner with her colleagues, but as weeks turned into months, those work dinners seemed to happen more often, and they were always vague. "Oh, it's nothing really special," she'd say, offering a half-hearted smile when I inquired about it. I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife was slipping away from me. My gut instinct was screaming, but I didn't want to assume the worst. I tried to talk to her about it, but every time I brought it up, she'd brush me off. "You're being paranoid, Mike. Just trust me," she would say, her tone that of annoyance mixed with pity. I loved her, but the panic was building inside me. I had to know the truth. The discovery came when I was at home one Saturday afternoon, scrolling through our shared computer to find a recipe for dinner. While browsing, I stumbled upon a folder labeled work. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked it open. What I found made my heart drop. It was an entire string of messages between Jenna and someone named Eric, my childhood rival. We grew up in the same neighborhood, played on the same soccer team, and even competed for the same scholarship. In high school, as I read through the texts, my stomach twisted. They were flirtatious, even explicit at times. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jenna was telling him how much she missed him, how she couldn't wait to see him again. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Eric was a well-known player in our town, always the one who got the accolades, and here he was taking my wife from me. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the walls were closing in. I confronted her that evening when she got home. I remember the look on her face when I let the words spill out, "I know about you and Eric." She froze, her expression morphing from surprise to anger in a split second. "Are you serious?" She snapped, disbelief lacing her tone. "You're going to believe some random messages over me." "Random messages? Jenna, they're from your phone. You've been lying to me." I screamed, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. The excuses poured out of her like a dam had broken. "It's not what you think. Eric was just a friend. He was there for me when you were." The words came fast and frantic as she backtracked, claiming it was harmless, but I knew better. Those messages were anything but harmless. In that moment, my heart was a whirlwind of emotions. I felt betrayed, furious, and utterly lost. How could she do this to me? I had always been there for her, supporting her through thick and thin. The image of our life together began to crumble in my mind, replaced by scenes of her with him. The laughter, the intimacy, the future we planned, everything felt tainted. I couldn't just let it go. I was done being the good husband who would brush everything under the rug. I needed to take action, and I needed to make her understand the gravity of what she'd done. As I stood there, I felt a new resolve building inside me. I was going to show her what betrayal really meant. What did that mean for me? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew I had a plan brewing. It was time to get back at both of them, and I would make sure it was unforgettable. This was only the beginning, and I had to make every moment count. The days following my confrontation with Jenna were a blur of anger and sadness. I couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal that clung to me like a second skin. I went through every possible emotion during this time: grief, rage, and a kind of disbelief that kept me awake at night. I replayed every moment in my mind, questioning what I could have done differently. But it didn't change the reality that my wife had chosen to be unfaithful with someone I had always considered a rival. I threw myself into work. I was fortunate enough to have a demanding job in tech sales that kept my mind occupied, but it was hard to hide the storm brewing inside me. My colleagues noticed the shift in my demeanor, asking if I was okay, but I brushed them off with vague responses. I didn't want to share my pain. It felt too raw, too personal. I wasn't ready to admit to anyone that I'd been blindsided by the person I loved the most. But as I faced the daily grind, a plan started to take shape. I knew I had to do something that would not only make Jenna realize the magnitude of her betrayal, but also give me a sense of control back in my life. The idea of revenge began to evolve in my mind, fueled by the hurt she had caused me. The thing about Eric was that he was always the flashy type, chasing after the limelight and recognition. He had a decent job at a local marketing firm, but he had this air about him that made him think he was better than everyone else. I knew that if I played my cards right, I could use this to my advantage. It was time to outshine him, not just as a husband but as a man. I started by doing some research. I connected with people I knew in the business community and asked about Eric's company. It didn't take long to find out that they were planning a big marketing event that aimed to boost their profile. I had experience organizing events for my own firm, so I thought, why not create a rival event that would completely overshadow theirs? I spent days planning and creating a pitch for a marketing showcase that would highlight local talents and innovative ideas. I poured my energy into this project, transforming my pain into something productive. I pulled in resources from my network, securing suppliers, venues, and even a few sponsors who were excited about the idea. With every step, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The idea of outdoing Eric became a driving force. Meanwhile, Jenna had the audacity to act as if nothing had happened. She would come home, casually asking about my day, while I was wrestling with the emotions of betrayal. I kept my distance, focusing on my plans and playing the part of a dutiful husband on the surface. But inside, I was a volcano ready to erupt. As the date of my event approached, I invited a few friends and family members to help me brainstorm ideas for promoting it. I wanted to make it a spectacle that Eric wouldn't forget, something that would highlight not just my success, but my ability to move on from her betrayal. Even my closest friends were surprised by my energy and enthusiasm. I told them I wanted to showcase the best of our community, and they bought into my vision wholeheartedly. Finally, the day of the event arrived. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement as I stood at the venue, watching everything come together. The local artists and businesses I had invited set up their booths, and soon, people began to arrive. In stark contrast, I learned about Eric's event just a few blocks away, and my heart raced at the thought of how this would play out. I could feel the anticipation in the air as friends encouraged me to promote my event. As the evening progressed, I could see the buzz building. I walked around, greeting attendees, and feeling a sense of pride swell within me. I was reclaiming my life, showing Jenna and Eric that I was not defined by their betrayal. I could feel Eric's presence looming in the back of my mind, and I secretly hoped he would show up to witness the success I had built from the ashes of my broken marriage. Just as I was starting to relax, I saw him walking toward my event. He had that cocky smile plastered on his face, as if he expected to steal the spotlight. But I was ready. I greeted him with a firm handshake that belied the storm brewing within me. "Eric, glad you could make it," I said, forcing a smile. He glanced around, taking in the atmosphere before smirking. "Nice little gathering you've got here, Mike. Too bad it's not as big as ours." I chuckled, but inside I was boiling. "We'll see about that, won't we?" As the night wore on, I made sure to keep the momentum going. I worked the crowd, networking and making connections. Each successful interaction fueled my adrenaline and made me feel more alive than I had in weeks. I watched as Eric's bravado slowly wilted. He realized he was no longer the center of attention. When the night ended, my event had been a resounding success. People left buzzing about the connections they made, and the local media even showed up to cover it. I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me, and as I packed up, I noticed Eric hanging back, his demeanor shifting from cocky to defeated. I knew that I had not just outshone him but exposed him for the fraud he was. I had taken control of my life again, and no matter what Jenna thought, I would come out on top. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. of my plan for revenge. I was ready to make sure the consequences of her actions would echo far beyond just this one night. In the aftermath of the event, I felt a newfound sense of confidence. I had taken a significant step toward reclaiming my life and had successfully overshadowed Eric. The thrill of success was intoxicating, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. I began to distance myself emotionally from Jenna, focusing on my personal goals and ambitions instead of the chaos of our failing marriage. However, the reality of my situation became apparent when I returned home that night. Jenna was waiting for me, her face a mixture of anger and confusion. "Where have you been, Mike?" she demanded. "I tried calling you multiple times." I shrugged, playing it cool. "Just celebrating a successful event. You know, the one that promotes local businesses and talent." Her expression darkened as she crossed her arms. "You mean the event you did in spite of Eric? You were just trying to show him up, weren't you?" "Maybe a little," I replied, unable to hide the smirk that crept onto my face. "But it worked out well for me." Jenna scoffed, but I could see the insecurity beneath her bravado. "You think you're so great now that you had one successful night. It doesn't change anything between us, Mike. Really, because it feels like I'm the one moving forward while you're still stuck in a mess of your own making." I couldn't help but challenge her. The tables had turned, and I was no longer the husband who would take her lies lying down. "Is this how you're going to treat me now?" Shot back, her voice rising. "You think being successful will erase what happened?" I took a deep breath, holding my ground. "No, but it shows that I'm more than just a guy who gets cheated on. I'm rising from the ashes, Jenna. It's time you realize the consequences of your actions." For a moment I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, but it quickly vanished, replaced by defiance. "You'll regret this. You think you can just move on without addressing our issues?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "We'll see about that, but I won't be dragged down by your decisions any longer, Jenna. I deserve better." With that, I walked away, leaving her standing there fuming. I had made my point clear, and I was determined to keep moving forward. But I knew this was just the beginning of the fallout. I had successfully taken my first step toward revenge, but I needed a more calculated approach if I wanted to truly make an impact. In the following weeks, I dedicated myself to my work, pouring every ounce of energy into my career. My event had garnered attention, and I quickly landed a few new clients as a result. It felt good to be recognized for my talents and not just for being Jenna's husband. The more successful I became, the more I reveled in each victory. But there was still a nagging feeling deep inside me. I needed to ensure that Jenna fully understood the consequences of her actions. I began reaching out to Eric, although it was under the guise of wanting to clear the air. I casually bumped into him at a local cafe and struck up a conversation. He was still riding high from the night of my event, but I could sense his confidence was starting to wane. He'd gotten wind of my success and was trying to downplay it as if it meant nothing. "Hey, Mike," he said, feigning casualness. "Heard your event was a big hit. Congrats, I guess." "Thanks, Eric. It was a lot of work, but worth it. You know how it is, hard work pays off." I watched him squirm as I spoke, enjoying my opportunity to flex my newfound confidence. "So, what's the next step for you?" he asked, trying to regain some ground. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "Oh, I've got a few ideas brewing, but let's just say I'm not finished with this little rivalry of ours." His eyes narrowed, and I could tell he was trying to read me. "What do you mean?" I simply smiled, letting the tension hang in the air. "You'll see soon enough." From that moment on, I made it my mission to keep Eric on his toes. I signed him up for a local competition that was known for spotlighting rising stars in our industry. It was a prestigious event, and I made sure he was aware of the stakes involved. The thrill of watching his anxiety grow as he contemplated how to match my rising success was a rush I hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, Jenna continued to act as if everything was normal between us, but I knew better. I could see the cracks in her facade. She was trying to maintain the illusion of our life together, but every time I received a promotion or landed a new client, it chipped away at her confidence. I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. As the competition approached, I ramped up my preparations. I knew that Eric was feeling the pressure, and I loved every moment of it. I began to hear whispers about how stressed he was, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I was determined to make this event a turning point, not just for my career, but also for my personal journey of healing and growth. On the day of the competition, I arrived early, soaking in the atmosphere. The venue was buzzing with energy, and I felt invigorated by the excitement in the air. I took a moment to appreciate how far I had come, and as I watched my competitors prepare, I realized that this was about more than just revenge. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of greatness, even in the face of betrayal. When Eric showed up, he was clearly rattled. I could see him pacing, trying to calm his nerves as he glanced around the room. "Hey, Mike," he greeted me, but there was a tightness in his tone. "Ready for the big show?" I asked, my voice laced with feigned innocence. "Yeah, I guess," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Just remember, it's all in good fun." I smiled, but inside I was bubbling with excitement. I wanted him to feel the stakes, to feel the weight of what this meant for both of us. I stepped onto the stage when my turn came, feeling the adrenaline rush through me. I had put my heart and soul into this presentation, and I was ready to show everyone what I was capable of. The audience was eager, and as I began to speak, I could see the faces of my peers engaged and interested. While I delivered my pitch, I glanced at Eric in the front row. He was visibly sweating, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. For every word I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on him that this was not just a competition, it was a reckoning. As I wrapped up my presentation, the applause echoed in my ears, and I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. I had not only showcased my talent, but had also taken a significant step toward reclaiming my life. It was time for Eric to face the consequences of his arrogance, and I was ready to make sure he understood just how impactful betrayal could be. The judges took their time deliberating, but I could feel the anticipation in the air. I was riding high on the adrenaline of my presentation and the thrill of seeing Eric squirm, and I knew I had given it my all. As I mingled with the crowd during the wait, I couldn't resist a few friendly jabs at Eric, who looked like he was ready to crawl under a rock. "Hey, Eric," I called out, flashing him a smile that masked my true feelings. "Nervous? You should be. I think I might have stolen this one." Shot me a glare, his frustration palpable. "You've always been a show-off, Mike. Let's see how the judges feel about that." I shrugged, enjoying the banter. "Guess we'll find out soon enough. Just remember, it's all about the audience's reaction, not just the judges, and I think I got them on my side." Finally, the judges emerged to announce the results. The tension in the room was electric, and I could feel the eyes of my peers on me. I stood among my fellow competitors, adrenaline coursing through my veins. When they called my name as the winner, the applause erupted, and I allowed myself to bask in the moment. I had done it. I had not only proved myself, but also defeated Eric in the process. I scanned the crowd for Jenna, who had been forced to attend out of obligation. I could see her clapping, but her expression was a mix of pride and annoyance. I turned my attention back to the podium, where I accepted the award, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over me. This victory was mine, and it was a reflection of my hard work, determination, and resilience. As I stepped down from the stage, Eric approached me, his demeanor deflated. "Congratulations, Mike. You deserved it," he begrudgingly admitted, but I could sense the bitterness behind his words. "Thanks, Eric. I guess hard work really does pay off," I replied, forcing a grin. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to take what's mine." The satisfaction of saying those words was like a cherry on top of my victory. The after-party was buzzing with energy, and I found myself surrounded by colleagues and friends, celebrating my win. I enjoyed the attention and praise, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Was I reveling in this too much? Was it fair to take pleasure in Eric's downfall, or was it simply a natural reaction to the pain Jenna had caused me? As the night wore on, I caught Jenna watching me from a distance, her expression unreadable. I knew she had come to the event out of obligation, but I could sense the shift in her demeanor as the night progressed. I noticed when I received several congratulatory remarks, she withdrew further into herself, an island of isolation among the crowd. Later, when I finally approached her, I could see the conflict in her eyes. "You really did great, Mike," she said, her voice tinged with an edge I couldn't quite place. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Jenna," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But I can't help but wonder if you really mean that or if you're just putting on a front." She hesitated, fidgeting with her drink. "I mean it, but this whole thing, it feels like you're just trying to get back at me through Eric." I scoffed. "This isn't just about revenge, Jenna. It's about proving to myself that I'm more than the man you betrayed." Her brow furrowed, and I could see her processing my words. "Do you really think this will fix things between us?" "I'm not sure I want to fix things anymore," I said, my voice steady. "You've made your choice and I'm making mine. I'm moving on. You should try it sometime." Jenna's face fell, and I could see the realization hit her. I had changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. I was no longer the man who would sit back and accept her infidelity. As the night ended, I walked away from Jenna, feeling a sense of liberation. I had established my independence, and though I still felt the sting of betrayal, I was taking control of my life. The aftermath of my success would ripple through my career, but that wasn't my only goal anymore. I was ready to fully embrace my new identity, and I knew that part of that involved letting go of Jenna for good. At home that night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. My heart was racing with excitement and fear of the unknown. I had opened a new chapter, and while I was still grappling with the emotions stemming from Jenna's betrayal, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. But there was still one final piece of revenge I wanted to execute. I wanted to ensure that Eric realized how insignificant he had become in my life, and more importantly, how detrimental his actions had been. I decided to dig deeper into his professional life and find a way to expose him for who he truly was, a man who thought he could play with other people's lives without facing the consequences. In the coming days, I started gathering information, leveraging my connections to uncover details about his work performance and his company's struggles. I began to formulate a plan that would not only hurt Eric, but also serve as a reminder to Jenna that her choices had consequences. I had made it clear to both of them that I was not someone to be trifled with, and I intended to follow through on that promise. As I pieced together my plan, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. I was ready to show both of them the full extent of my resolve, and I was more than ready to take my revenge to the next level. The game was on, and I was playing to win, no matter the cost. The days following my victory at the competition were filled with an exhilarating mix of newfound confidence and strategizing my next moves. I was determined to ensure that Jenna and Eric would feel the weight of their decisions, and I was ready to execute the final act of revenge. The thought of dismantling Eric's comfortable little world filled me with a sense of purpose. It was as if I were reclaiming my power, piece by piece. I started by utilizing my connections in the marketing industry. I reached out to a few acquaintances who worked at different firms and casually mentioned Eric's name, revealing bits of information about his current projects and how they were being received. It didn't take long for me to learn that his firm had been struggling to maintain a positive reputation after a series of failed campaigns. Their recent work had been called out for lacking creativity and failing to deliver results, and I realized I could amplify that narrative. As I compiled information, I put together a dossier of Eric's recent work and the negative feedback it had received. I reached out to a couple of local marketing blogs and industry forums, sharing the insights I had gathered. With a little finesse, I framed it as a cautionary tale for other businesses about the risks of aligning with someone whose work was losing its luster. I wanted to ensure that Eric felt the heat of public scrutiny, and I was more than willing to orchestrate it from the shadows. Around the same time, I noticed Jenna becoming more restless. She was trying hard to maintain the appearance of normalcy, but I could tell she was struggling with the reality of our situation. We still lived in the same house, but the emotional distance was palpable. One evening, she confronted me while I was working late at the dining table. "Mike, we need to talk about us," she said, her voice steady but strained. I looked up, trying to gauge her intentions. "What's there to talk about, Jenna? You made your choice and I'm making mine." Her brow furrowed, and I could see she was trying to hold back her frustration. "You're acting like this is some game, and it's not. I just want to know if you're willing to work on things." "Work on what?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "You've already shown me how little our marriage means to you. How can I trust you again?" "I know I messed up, Mike, but I'm trying to make it right," she pleaded, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of understanding. "Trying to make it right?" I echoed incredulously. "You've already made your choice, Jenna. You chose him over me." Her expression shifted, and I could see the battle inside her. "I thought you were better than this, Mike. I thought you'd fight for us." "Fight for what?" I replied, feeling anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You think I'm going to invest in a relationship that's built on betrayal? I'm not going to be the fool who keeps allowing you to hurt me." The conversation spiraled into a heated argument, but I refused to let her manipulate my emotions any further. I was done with the cycle of pain. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into the chaos. After our argument, I took a step back and reassessed my approach. While I had been focusing on Eric, I realized that Jenna needed to see the full implications of her actions too. I wanted her to understand that her betrayal had consequences beyond just our relationship. It was time to ensure she realized that both her personal and professional lives could be affected. I began casually mentioning to mutual friends about the negative press Eric was receiving. I wanted to plant the seeds of doubt in her mind, to make her question the stability of her choice. Each conversation I had subtly reinforced the idea that Eric was not the golden boy she thought he was, but rather a man on the verge of professional collapse. "Have you heard about Eric's recent work? It's not looking good, Jenna. I think his company is in trouble," I said one evening while we were having dinner. I watched her closely for any signs of a reaction. "Really? What do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. "Just that he seems to be losing his touch. I heard from a few people that his last campaign was a disaster," I replied, trying to appear nonchalant. "Could be a rough year ahead for him." As I continued to drop these little hints, I could see the uncertainty creeping into her demeanor. It was satisfying to witness her grappling with the implications of her choice. I could tell she was starting to question how stable her relationship with Eric really was, and it fueled my motivation. Meanwhile, I kept pushing forward with my own career. I had landed more clients in the weeks after my victory, and my personal brand was thriving. I was gaining recognition as a rising star in the marketing community, and I relished every moment of it. I was no longer just the guy who was cheated on. I had transformed into a force to be reckoned with. As I watched Jenna fumble through her emotions, the final pieces of my plan began to fall into place. I had secured a few interviews with local media outlets who were interested in covering my story and the success of the event I had organized. In my interviews, I planned to highlight the importance of integrity and hard work, subtly drawing comparisons between my rise and Eric's impending downfall. The day of the first interview arrived, and I was filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. I had prepared extensively, and I was determined to convey my message clearly. When the cameras started rolling, I made sure to articulate my journey with sincerity, explaining how resilience and dedication had propelled me forward. As I spoke candidly about my experiences, I couldn't help but think of Jenna and Eric. I knew they would both be watching, and I wanted to make sure they understood the weight of my words. In the end, it's not just about success. It's about the choices you make and the impact they have on those around you, I said, emphasizing the importance of integrity in both business and personal relationships. After the interview aired, I received an overwhelming response. People resonated with my story, and I was suddenly inundated with messages of support and encouragement. But what I hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect it would have on Jenna and Eric. Not long after the interview, tensions between Jenna and Eric began to surface. She confronted him about the negative press, and I could see the cracks in their relationship growing wider. It felt surreal to watch as the very foundation of their affair began to crumble under the weight of the truth. It was around this time that I received word from one of my contacts that Eric's company was about to face a major setback due to the negative publicity. They were losing clients, and the board was growing increasingly concerned about his leadership. The news filled me with a sense of vindication. I had orchestrated this downfall without even lifting a finger. Eric's arrogance was now his undoing, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction as I realized the impact of my actions. The final pieces of my revenge were unfolding perfectly. I had become a symbol of resilience, while Eric was slipping further into obscurity, and Jenna was left to grapple with the consequences of her choices. I could see her world shifting, and I relished the thought of her coming to terms with what she had done. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and proving to myself that I was worth more than I had ever allowed myself to believe. As I prepared for the next step in my journey, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer defined by the pain of betrayal. I was a man on a mission, and I was ready to embrace whatever awaited me on the horizon. The final act of my revenge was not just about Eric and Jenna. It was about my own transformation, and I was finally ready to step into my new life. As I settled into my new routine, the fallout from my decisions continued to unfold. I had spent weeks carefully orchestrating my comeback, and with each passing day, it became clearer that Eric was crumbling under the pressure. Rumors about his company's impending downfall swirled through our professional circles, and I could hardly contain my satisfaction knowing that my actions had played a pivotal role in his unraveling. Jenna, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly agitated. She had always been the type to seek comfort in stability, and with Eric's world falling apart, I could see the apprehension creeping into her demeanor. The tension between them was palpable, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she confronted him about everything. One evening, I returned home after a long day at work, and I found Jenna sitting at the dining table, her head resting in her hands. I could tell she had been crying. My heart wavered for a moment, torn between the anger I felt towards her and the empathy that lingered in the background. I decided to approach her cautiously. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "No, Mike, I'm not okay," she replied, her voice trembling. "Things with Eric are falling apart and I don't know what to do." I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter, intrigued despite myself. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's been distant. His company is struggling and I can't help but feel responsible. I thought I was helping him, but now it feels like everything is crumbling beneath us," she admitted, her vulnerability stark against the backdrop of my previous pain. "Maybe that's because he wasn't really the man you thought he was," I replied, unable to resist the urge to take a jab. "You had to know that his charm was just a facade." Jenna shot me a frustrated look. "This isn't about you being right, Mike. I made a mistake and I'm trying to face it. But now I have to deal with Eric's mess on top of my own." I felt a surge of anger bloom within me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "You mean the mess you created for yourself? The choice you made to betray our marriage?" Her shoulders slumped as she sighed deeply. "I know I messed up, but I didn't think it would turn into this. I didn't want to hurt anyone, and now I feel trapped." For a moment, I let her words hang in the air, contemplating the complexity of human emotions. I had spent so long focused on my revenge that I had neglected to acknowledge the reality of Jenna's situation. She was grappling with consequences that weren't just affecting her but also spilling over into her relationship with Eric. "What do you want from me, Jenna?" I asked, my patience stretched thin. "You can't expect me to just forgive and forget. I want you to understand that I'm struggling, that I made a choice I thought was right, but I see now how wrong I was," she said, her voice softening. "I want to make things right with you." The honesty in her eyes caught me off guard. For a fleeting moment, I considered the possibility of reconciling, of finding a way to rebuild what had been broken. But then I remembered the pain, the betrayal, and the way she had taken my trust and trampled on it. "Jenna, I appreciate your honesty, but I can't go back to the way things were. You chose him over me, and that's not something I can easily forget," I replied, my voice steady. "I've moved on in ways I couldn't have imagined before. I'm focused on my future now, and I think it's best if we keep our distance." Her eyes glistened with tears as she nodded slowly, accepting my words. "I understand. I just wish things could have been different. Me too, I admitted, a pang of sadness washing over me. But life doesn't always go according to plan. I watched her as she composed herself, drawing strength from somewhere deep inside. She was facing the consequences of her actions, just as I had faced the reality of my pain. In that moment, I realized that my revenge wasn't just about hurting them. It was about reclaiming my own identity and learning to stand strong in the face of betrayal. A few days later, I received a call that solidified my newfound clarity. It was one of my contacts who worked for a marketing publication. They wanted to feature my story about resilience and how I had turned my heartbreak into motivation. I was ecstatic and immediately accepted the offer. This was my chance to share my journey with others, to inspire those who might be going through similar situations. When the article was published, the response was overwhelming. People reached out to me, sharing their own stories of heartache and triumph. I began to understand the power of vulnerability, the way it could connect us and foster healing. I had transformed from a man who felt defeated into one who could inspire others, and that realization filled me with pride. As for Eric, the negative press continued to mount. I watched him fade into obscurity as the whispers grew louder about his failings as a leader. Jenna tried to maintain her relationship with him, but it became increasingly strained. I could see the cracks in their foundation grow wider, and I knew that my plan had worked. One evening, I bumped into Jenna at a local coffee shop. She looked different, more composed, but still carrying the weight of her choices. "Hey, Mike," she said, a hesitant smile on her face. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her words. "Thank you for what?" "For forcing me to confront my reality. I've been doing a lot of soul-searching, and I realize now that I need to focus on myself. I've decided to take a break from everything," she replied, her voice steady. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "That sounds like a good idea. Sometimes stepping back is the best way to move forward." We shared a moment of understanding, a brief connection that spoke volumes about our respective journeys. It was evident that we were both on different paths now, and perhaps that was for the best. As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had survived the betrayal, emerged stronger, and learned the true meaning of resilience. My journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about healing and discovering who I truly was outside of my relationship with Jenna. Now, I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. My success was no longer tied to my past, but rather an opportunity to forge ahead, to create a life defined by my own choices. I had transformed my pain into a powerful motivator, and as I stepped into this new chapter, I felt empowered and free. I was finally ready to write my own story.